Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City of Alameda's Mayor's COVID-19 Town Hall. I'm Sarah Henry, the city's Public Information Officer. Mayor Ashcraft invited special guests Ellen Corbett, East Bay Regional Park District Board Member, Amy Wooldridge, Alameda Recreation and Parks Director, and Paul Rolleri, Alameda Police Chief, to join her in the first half hour, and Liz Watson, Executive Director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center, to join her in the second half hour. Please note, all participants have been muted. To submit a question, please use the chat feature. Following their opening remarks, the mayor and her guests will be available to answer your questions. I'd now like to turn today's town hall over to Alameda Mayor Marilyn Ezzy Ashcraft.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for being here today. It is lovely to see you, those of you who have your picture up, because I can tell you, I really miss seeing my residents and business folks in your places of business. But, and I do want to do a quick little explanation. I know some of you heard me say previously, and I think it was in my weekly newspaper article this week, that Congresswoman Barbara Lee would be our guest today. She was supposed to be, but the Congress, as you may have heard, got called back to DC for the special economic stimulus bill that was voted on yesterday. And in fact, Congresswoman Lee had a lovely conference call with her 7 mayors in her district, and I was one of them yesterday right after she got off the floor. And her office has promised me we'll have her next week. But what we did, because we wanted to just update people in real time about what this new stimulus package contains, so at the Congresswoman's suggestion, we have invited Liz Watson, who will talk to us in the second half of this town hall. She is the executive director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center, and she is just staying up to the minute on these new bills that are being passed. So you'll have a chance to ask some questions of her, and then next week you'll get to ask the Congresswoman herself. But in the meantime, I'm really excited and grateful to the guests who have joined me today, because we are now starting our 6th week of sheltering in place, and it's not easy, and I'll be the first one to admit that. And you are only supposed to leave your homes to go out and conduct essential business or essential activity, and yet getting exercise and fresh air is considered essential activity. And I want you to do that. I want you to get out and keep moving, because it's just healthy physically and psychologically. Don't stay inside cooped up, as if I needed to tell my residents that. But at the same time, we still are in a shelter-in-place order for a reason, and that is because of the coronavirus, this COVID-19 pandemic that we're participating in. The reason that starting this week, we've all been told that when we're in public, we wear our mask or face covering, always have something with you to cover your mouth and your nose when you're out in public with other people, grocery store, doctor's office, picking up a prescription, what have you. Even when you're out exercising, it's a good idea. So anyway, we know you're going to get out there and get out in the beautiful open fresh air, but we also have had to close off portions of our parks, and that is under the order of all the public health officers in the Bay Area. It's very smart. Barbara Lee actually talked about this in our conference call yesterday, that she's so proud of our Bay Area counties. We were the first in the nation to impose shelter-in-place orders, and it will serve us well in the long run. I do believe we're going to be up and opening for business, gradually opening for business again, because we've kept our numbers down. But the public health officers were seeing an increase in the amount of positive cases and in the amount of deaths in the Bay Area counties. So they said, we've got to take further precautions. That's why we're wearing face coverings. But enough from me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first ask if we can hear from Alameda Recreation and Parks Director Amy Wooldridge to talk a little bit about the experience in our parks, what's open, what's not, what please not to do, what you can do. Police Chief Paul Rolleri can chime in and you know, his suggestions, what he's seeing. And then Ellen Corbett. It's great to have Ellen Corbett. She represents our region in the East Bay Regional Parks District. Some of the East Bay Regional Parks District parks have actually been closed. Ours are not among them. She'll tell you the limitations, but it does rely on, you know, cooperation and good behavior, which I know my Alameda residents are so capable of. So with that, Amy Wooldridge, do you want to give us your view as Recreation and Parks Director?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for joining and taking the time. We're seeing a lot of people using our parks responsibly, and which I really appreciate. And I know that takes effort. We have so many beautiful parks that people love taking advantage of. In terms of what's open and what's not, I'll start with what's open. Essentially, all of the open grass areas and trails and walkways are open. Currently, our 2 boat ramps are open as well. For the most part, I'd say everything else is closed. Whether it's picnic tables are taped off, playgrounds, basketball hoops, tennis, pickleball, handball courts, dog park, skate park. So for the most part, anything where there's the potential for that cross touch and either not able to keep the social distance of 6 feet, we have closed. Many of those are actually by a mandate of the order. So what I really encourage people to do is to make sure, as the mayor said, it's important for your own self-care and your family to get outside, but to please use the parks responsibly. Make sure you're keeping distance, not only the 6-foot distance when you're walking, but if you're running or biking, you need more like 10 to 12 feet distance, because you know, I huff a lot when I run, and so that if you do cough or something happens, it actually spreads farther. And making sure you're wearing masks if you have to be near people. So, for example, we instituted just this week at an Ensno boat launch on the rock wall that people are required when fishing out there to wear masks, because it's not possible to pass a person and have 6 feet of social distance. So as things evolve, we keep making adjustments like that, but we really encourage people to come out with your family, your household unit. You could fly a kite, you can toss a ball, you could take a walk. So there are ways to really take care of yourself and enjoy the parks, but to really be doing it responsibly. And I'm happy to answer any questions through the chat of how to use the parks.
And I was going to ask our Police Chief, Paul Rolleri, do you want to weigh in? Are you hearing anything about people maybe using parks irresponsibly or other related topics?
Yes, unfortunately. I mean, Amy's absolutely right that most of the people in the city are responsibly using the parks and doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of social distancing and wearing their masks. However, we've all seen examples when people are not doing that. Early on, it was there was the basketball courts, the soccer fields were getting heavy use, and we did some things to mitigate that. And but we still have problems. We have some of that happening at the dog park, at the beach, on some of the Bay Trail around Harbor Bay Isle, and various spots. We've been trying to just educate people and warn them. This is new for everybody. There's no playbook, as everyone knows. It's new for the police department to be enforcing this. It's new for the citizens to be mindful of it. And honestly, in some cases, for people to take it seriously. The first 6.5 weeks of this, we did not issue one criminal citation for violating the order. Today that changed. We wrote today our first criminal citation for someone essentially refusing to put a mask on in a store. And she was given 3 different opportunities in 3 different locations over a 90-minute period. And she also had a little bit too much to drink at 9 o'clock this morning. So off to jail she went with an extra citation to boot. Fortunately, we haven't had to have that happen with anyone else, but it is a challenge. There are some exceptions in the rule that have led some people to interpret it in a way that benefits what they would like to do, without taking into consideration how it affects others around them. And again, we're just doing the best we can to try to keep everybody in line.
Thank you for that. And, you know, mentioning the grocery store, that is one of the parts of this order, this enhanced order from our public health officers, that you will not be admitted to a grocery store, is what they said, if you're not wearing a mask. And It's to protect you from COVID-19. It's to protect others in case you happen to be carrying it, because you could even be what they call a silent spreader and not symptomatic. And it's to protect those grocery store workers who are among our frontline essential workers. So we are all in this together, and we've got to each do our part. I know a little earlier today, I stopped out at our food bank out at Alameda Point, and I popped in to say hello and thank you to all the volunteers and Cindy Houts, our remarkable food bank executive director. And I said, "How you doing, Cindy?" And she said, "Yeah, well, you know, every day is different. I mean, it's my first pandemic, and so and so it is all of our first pandemic." And what Cindy went on to say was, "And I hope it's our last." And we're learning some really good practices for how to stay safe, but then we have to implement them. Let's hear from Ellen Corbett, because, you know, Ellen represents us on the East Bay Regional Park District Board. That park district, you may know, is the largest regional park district in the nation. And Ellen can give us statistics about, you know, just how big, and it's a fabulous collection of wonderful, you know, land, open space, but not easy to patrol, I'm sure, in the best of times. So let's hear from Ellen. Tell us what your experience has been in general in the Park District and specifically for the property. In fact, you could even specify for folks which areas of Alameda are under East Bay Regional Parks District jurisdiction.
Yeah, of course. And Mayor, let me just first say thank you so much for your leadership in getting the word out about how important it is to follow just a few simple rules so we can all be safe. Very much appreciate that. We've heard all kinds of messages across the country, but I very much appreciate the one that you have just given in this town hall. So thank you for that. And thanks for inviting me. The East Bay Regional Park District, as you mentioned, it's the largest regional park district in the country. We have over 125,000 acres and 55 miles of shoreline and 1,300 miles of trails. But some of our most beautiful parks are here in Alameda. Our crown jewel, so to speak, is Crown Beach, right here in Alameda. We're very proud of that beautiful space. And of course, Crab Cove is one of our most popular places for young people to go on field trips and learn about the environment and our San Francisco Bay. So, so let me tell you what's going on in the Park District. Just as you mentioned, Mayor, it's going to be a beautiful weekend. And historically, on beautiful weekends, people come to beautiful parks. So we're expecting a lot of people. So let's just follow a few rules. You'll see lots of signage and messaging by the East Bay Regional Park District. It's really, really important to follow these rules. We're in this together, and we want to be able to keep the parks open as long as possible. So obviously, as you already mentioned, this weekend, we're asking people to bring their masks with them and make sure that they stay 6 feet apart. Distancing is extremely important. We have a few other rules that we are applying during this time. Sometimes we do allow dogs off leash in our parks, but dogs are not off leash at all in any East Bay parks. And we have also had to close our playgrounds and all of our facilities. So our visitor centers, like Crab Cove Visitor Center, unfortunately is closed at this time. And some of our, our big dog park, that Point Isabel is closed, and our water fountains are not open, and our restrooms are not open right now for safety reasons. So a few simple things: bring your mask, go before you go, bring some water, bring some hand sanitizer. But we do want you to enjoy our parks.
Come in.
We are following what what the Alameda and Contra Costa, because we're in 2 counties, health directors have told us, and that is keep the parks open
I'm on a webinar.
as we can.
Go ahead.
So that we can make sure people have a place to be healthy and take care of their mental health and get out and get a little fresh air. So thank you. And if we follow these few rules, everything will go well.
So let me ask you, Ellen, about the dogs, the topic of dogs. I'm trying to communicate with my residents in so many different ways. I do a weekly newspaper column in our 2 newspapers, and I'm interviewed for 2 radio shows. One is K-Jets with our Encinal High School students remotely. That's really fun. They allowed us how 9 o'clock in the morning is a little early for them, but they do well. And then there's a public radio station in Alameda, but I got a question yesterday from a listener about saying, we're noticing more trash piling up. The trash cans in the park, Crab Cove, Crown Beach are kind of overflowing. What's with that? And so I said, well, I'm going to be speaking with Ellen Corbett, our representative from the Park District soon. I'll raise that, but I said, here's what I would just throw out to you. I know that everybody's staff is really stretched thin right now. I mean, our staff certainly is, and they're doing all kinds of things and talk about multitasking. But I said, I love to backpack when I get a chance, and there's a rule for backpackers. If you packed it in, you pack it out and leave nothing but your footprints, that one. So there's no reason we can't be doing the same thing here. It maybe takes a little bit of pre-planning, but you probably have those bags you're now getting when you go to get takeout, because you're all supporting our local restaurants even during the shelter in place. Save that bag, tuck it in your pocket or your backpack, bring it with you so that if you shouldn't be picnicking, I'm just going to throw that out there, but say you've got something you need to toss out, pull that bag out, put it in, and that would include whatever your dog leaves behind. So your dog, your responsibility right now, while we're not getting as regular trash pickups as usual perhaps, please don't leave your dog's litter behind, even in those nice little bags, because you're one person, one dog, or maybe more than one dog, but just multiply that by all the people who are using our parks. So did I steer them in the right direction, Ellen?
Absolutely, Mayor. We're going to hire you to do our next public service announcement.
I've got the headphones too, if you want to.
You hit it right on the head. There's a couple of things happening. As you mentioned, we are short-staffed. We have to follow the safety rules like everyone else. Shelter in place applies to our workers as well. So we have a smaller staff for safety reasons, and also because we are following the orders of the health district. But the other thing, in addition to that, we are specifically asking people during this time to please help us. We need our park users' help right now. We need them to pack in and pack out, and that does include what their dogs leave behind as well. And we are seeing record numbers of usage in all of our parks on the weekends and the weekdays. You can't go to work, you can't go to the mall, your kids aren't in school, you go to the parks, right? And we love the fact that people are in our parks and they love them and they want to be in them, and we appreciate that. But we have so much extra usage, more people in the parks, more dogs in the parks, and we really want people to follow that pack in and pack out. And as we can do more, we will do more, but we really do ask this at this time for a little help from our park users. If you could help us out, we would really, really appreciate it. And, we have signs that remind people, but that doesn't always work. So Thank you. You heard it from your mayor.
Yeah. Well, and I should also, I was kind of brief in my introduction. Not only is Ellen Corbett, our representative on the East Bay Regional Parks District, she's a former mayor of the city of San Leandro right next door, and she's a former state senator. And I remember you, I think we're in the state senate when we were trying to get our library bond supported and the statewide bond passed, and you were always so supportive. So we can thank Ellen for supporting our library when we were still working to just build it. And Amy,
proud to help you with that.
Oh, we are grateful, and it's a treasured institution in our city. And how about you, Amy? What particular issues could you use the public's help with?
Dogs is actually a big one. I would ask for help picking up after dogs, but also keeping dogs in areas where they're appropriate. So one thing we're already planning for is when we do get to reopen the parks, for example. And so when we have dogs congregating, dozens of them off leash on an athletic field where they're not supposed to be, they're doing their various business on that field. And then we need to think about the fact that both our staff need to come daily and pick up after people's dogs. We've found that that's increased immensely. But also kids are going to be playing on that field, hopefully, in however many weeks, months. And we want those fields to be clean and safe for them when they come back. And I think in general, also just would love people's help I know it's frustrating not to have your favorite facility But we have a pretty high number of people that are breaking locks, that are ripping tape, that are ripping bags off drinking fountains, things like that. And so for every lock that has to get repaired and fence that has to get repaired because people are cutting it or deciding that they should be able to use it, that's longer it'll take us to reopen facilities, and just more time and cost to the Parks Department overall and to the city overall, at a time where expenses are adding up.
Thank you. I would echo that our expenses are growing faster than our revenue. You know, I think we probably have had some questions submitted by our audience. And Sarah Henry, if you would ask those questions, and whoever it was directed to will answer.
Yes, absolutely. Got to have a few here. The first one is for the chief. You talked about this a little bit, but what is the plan for enforcement of mask wearing? Many of the businesses are not enforcing it. Can APD routinely police this in big business areas?
So yes, we can. The struggle for us is, and I know sometimes it's frustrating for people to hear people in the government say we don't have enough people, but for those of you who don't follow kind of what we do at APD on a daily basis, we typically will have somewhere between 7 and 10 police officers on duty for the entire island at any given time. And keep in mind that they're still doing the sort of the normal routine police work that we do every day, answering calls for service. So we don't always have somebody that's available and free to go to the stores and walk through and do compliance checks. And so what we wind up doing instead is reacting to calls when we get them. I wish we had more people so that we could be more proactive. I would encourage anybody that's on this call, or you know, anybody that might watch it later on tape, that if you do see something like that, excuse me, please give us a call. We will come down there, and it may not get the highest priority. Again, it just depends on what's going on, but we will come down there and try to encourage people to do the right thing. We're not trying to go down there and arrest folks, and it would actually be counterproductive, because then it's putting our officers well within 6 feet of somebody else. They're not going to go to jail. We don't want to take people to jail if people who are going to jail are getting released right away. So it would really be better if people would just be compliant, even if they don't think that they need it, but to protect everybody else around them. And that would be super helpful.
Paula, are you getting any assistance from code enforcement in the city on some of these calls?
Yes, Mayor. Yes. So the way we've kind of, again, there was no playbook on this going in, but what we've done, I think, pretty successfully is that if the police department dispatch receives a call regarding a business issue, or, for example, a landscaper or a contractor who might be doing non-essential work, then we are forwarding those calls generally over to code enforcement, and then they are dispatching code enforcement officers to do the compliance check. If they are not available, if it's after hours, then the police department is doing it.
Look at it. Thanks. Next
Sure.
question, Sarah.
Yes, this is for board member Ellen Corbett. If I sit, and I've seen this so much on social media, if I sit at a distance, may I sit on the beach?
Like sit at a distance from other people?
Yes,
From other people,
you may
exactly.
sit on the beach, but that doesn't exempt you from following any of the other rules. You need to distance. You need to pack in and pack out, as the mayor said. You should make sure you have your mask with you. Your mask is supposed to be with you, and you're supposed to put it on if you come in closer contact than 6 feet with individuals. But you can sit on the beach. Your dog can't sit on the beach, but you can sit on the beach, and please follow all the rest of the rules, and you'll be okay, and then we'll be able to continue to keep the beach open.
Thank you.
Mayor, here's one for you. When will the city start issuing permits to homeowners so that we can do needed repairs on our homes? Only large developers have been able to keep working.
Good question. So I join other elected officials in Alameda County every week for an update from our county public health department. well, the agency, which is the county sheriff who oversees the county Office of Emergency Services, and our public health officer, Dr. Erica Pond. And I know there have been those questions about when construction can start opening up again. One of the exceptions in the original shelter-in-place order from the county was that housing projects that had 10% or more affordable housing in them, which in Alameda is every housing project, I mean, for more than one unit, could move forward. So that's why you're seeing construction out at Alameda Point. It's pretty darn impressive. We are ready to open this senior affordable apartment building that is 100% affordable, 50% of the units set aside for formerly homeless veterans. And there's a multifamily building that's going up now. When it comes to residential, I know, and I actually asked a question about construction on the call last week, and the public health officer said they're looking at that. They want to be able to know that, well, they want a couple things. They want to see hospitalization rates going down, because that just talks about the general safety from COVID-19 in our area. And they also want to know that the kinds of restrictions we're under can be complied with. So could that contractor or worker wear a mask? Could they social distance themselves 6 feet or more from another worker? And so I do anticipate in the next week or so, we're going to see some refined guidelines. So just know that I've been in touch with the county folks, but I'm also one who will follow, not lead. I will forward inquiries, and I've had a number of them, but I'm not going to bring pressure on our public health officials to do something they don't think it's time to do yet, because the last thing we want is to open up too slowly and have a rebound and go back to shelter in place. When we leave this behind, we want to leave it behind. So but know that I've got my eye on that, because it's we want to keep people sheltered with roofs over their heads. Some of you are wanting to build accessory dwelling units or doing well-needed repairs. So bear with us a little longer, and I think we'll have some answers for you in the next couple of weeks.
Here's another question.
Okay, another couple, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think this one would go to the chief. Our grocery store is supposed to be limiting the number of customers in the store at the same time. Many are, but some are not. This person's experienced several customers clustering around shelves where the 6-foot spacing, is limited going down aisles.
I'm actually going to jump in on that one. So what I would recommend is that if you go to the Alameda County Public Health website, and I think it is, what is it, Sarah? She knows everything.
It's acphd.org.
acphd.org. You will find there, somewhere in the COVID information, both an email address and a phone number that you can use if you see a business that is non-compliant. And so what they will do, and I mean, that goes to the county sheriff, Sheriff Ahern. He will go through them, and then he will direct those complaints to whatever particular jurisdiction it is. I will, without naming names, say that I was waiting in line. Actually, I was in a large grocery store a couple of days ago, and the customers were great. They were wearing their masks, and the clerks were. The security guards weren't. Mm-hmm. And so I just made a mental note. I'm going to pop in another time, and if they're still not wearing their masks, I am going to, I will email the sheriff. And I actually think, because this would be a chain grocery store, that they might actually go more to the corporate level on that. But yeah, but the answer is yes, 6 feet. Social distancing means 6 feet. As I like to say, you can't cheat a virus. The reason the public health officers tell you 6 feet is that that is how far the virus can travel if you cough, or even when you're talking. And then one of you, either Amy or Ellen, I think, talked about when you're running, yes, you expel those particles more forcefully. Sarah's a runner every morning, and I know she, socially distances herself more than 6 feet from the next runner. So you can't fudge this. What we're trying to do is keep you healthy and keep others healthy and get past this emergency state. maybe, let's see, what time is it? Because I see we've got
Our others,
Ms.
yeah.
Watson from Washington, D.C. is on the line. But maybe we can take one or two more.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a person who says they've noticed on paths in the parks, so this is for both Ellen and Amy, specifically that people are not wearing masks when walking. Can you address police presence on park paths?
Well, I don't know, Amy, you want to go first? The thing about masks is they are recommended, and they are recommended to be worn when you're inside in stores and places like that. And you have to have them on when you're in a store in a closed space, and you have to be very, serious about your 6 feet. When you're outdoors, you should be wearing your mask, but it is recommended. It's not like you are breaking the rule if you're not wearing it. You need to have it with you, though. If you come within 6 feet of somebody, you should have it on. So if you're out walking on the beach, for example, and you're out at the end and you're not around other people and you may happen to have your mask off, you're not violating the rule. But, again, as the mayor said, this is a personal responsibility sort of situation. People want to be wearing them to protect others. And when someone else is wearing one, they're protecting you. And I would just add, our police officers work very closely with Alameda Police. And I agree with the chief that the role of the police on things like this, like if someone was walking down the trail, education is the most important conversation that a police officer can have with individuals, just to let them know why this rule is there, why we need people to follow it, and that what we're really about is trying to keep people safe.
Sarah, could I just add something?
Please, yeah.
So in addition to what everybody else has said, one of the issues that is difficult for the police department, and that I'll just pass on to all of you, is that the order exempts you from wearing the mask if you're walking with, say, immediate family members from your same household.
Right.
So as one of us might be walking in a path going in one direction, and you might see a group of 3 or 4 people coming towards you and they don't have masks on, that may not be a violation in and of itself. However, as Ellen mentioned, when you get within, and I wouldn't wait till 6 feet, but as people start to get closer, they should either be doing something to make additional distance between them by moving right or left, or by putting their mask on. So everyone should have one with them, but the mere sight of somebody outside without one, they could be jogging, they could be riding a bicycle. They're not required to wear a mask then, unless or until they get within 6 feet. And that's the tricky part, because that can change in the middle of a grocery store. Some stores have gone to one-way aisles to avoid people passing too close together. Other stores that are smaller and cramped, they don't have that ability, and those are the ones that we hope will limit the number of people coming in. So keep that in mind. Be reasonable. It's not worth getting into an argument or a fight with somebody, because again, they may not be violating the rule if they're with their family. It's really, then it gets back to the 6-foot zone.
Amy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's all been well said.
Okay, thanks.
And Marilyn, I'll just add that somebody just commented that just a reminder not to call 911 for the mask violation, but instead to call the non-emergency number, which is 510-337-8340. So
thank you for raising that, whoever
that person.
Was. Yes, it's the non-emergency number. I think at this time, I want to thank all of our 3 guests, our first 3 guests, Ellen Corbett from East Bay Regional Parks District Board, Amy Wooldridge, Recreation Parks Director for Alameda, and Alameda Police Chief Paul Rolleri. Thank you so much for making yourselves available and all that good information. And I think we're all capable of doing all the things they talked about. So let's get out there, let's spread the word, enjoy the outdoors, but do it safely. And thank you so much. You are welcome to stay on and listen, but we are now going to welcome Liz Watson, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. And I know a little bit about Liz because I watched a YouTube video that you did. And so she's like the rest of us, sheltering in place, but working from home remotely. She says 3 kids, a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old son and daughter, and then a dog. And apparently the kids are behaving quite well, the dog not so much. But she's a busy woman with an impressive resume. So I may have said earlier, I did say earlier that Liz is the executive director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. And she also served previously as the Labor Policy Director and Chief Labor Counsel on the House Education and Labor Committee, the Executive Director of the Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality, and the Director of the Workplace Justice Program at the National Women's Law Center. And in 2018, she was the Democratic nominee for Congress in her home district of, is IN09, is that Indiana?
Yep.
All right. And as I would expect, ran a bold, progressive, grassroots-led campaign. So we've invited Liz, whose name was actually provided to us from Barbara Lee's, Congresswoman Barbara Lee's office, as someone who could give us that overview, that up-to-date look at the most recent economic relief package that was passed by the House just yesterday. And I don't know if you were on the call, and you might not have been earlier when I said that Congresswoman Lee did do a conference call with the 7 mayors in her district yesterday, right after she got off the floor. So we, and I was among them, and we had a chance to hear from her. But we would love to have you give an overview and then answer questions that our listeners may have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And Mayor Ashcraft, I want to say, hearing you, your impassioned pleas to your constituents to follow the social distancing rules, and there aren't any shortcuts. It's exactly right. And it's so wonderful to hear impassioned leaders who are really fighting for the health and safety of everyone in your community. And thanks to everybody who's on this call for caring about how you can keep your community safe. And that's what we need people to do in every community across the country. So as you heard, I run the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. I have the honor of getting to work with and learn from Congresswoman Barbara Lee on a regular basis, and am very happy to be here to get to join her constituents for this conversation. So what I'll do is maybe just set the stage a little bit by talking about the broad picture of some of the coronavirus relief packages that have been passed, and then particularly with the focus on what happened yesterday, and then, as you heard, take some questions. So
Liz, I'll just chime in to say, I can tell just looking at the names on the screen, we have a lot of small business owners and and also directors of some of our business associations. And I know you'll touch on all those things, but you can start anticipating some questions. But again, thank you so much for being here.
That's very helpful to know. So as we know, small businesses are hurting. We know that workers are hurting, that as you know, both businesses and workers, right, did not cause the problems that we're facing, but are certainly feeling the impact in a very big way. We've seen 50,000, nearly 50,000 deaths in the United States. 26 million Americans filing for unemployment in just the past 5 weeks alone. So what we're looking at is the need for just a really dramatic and sweeping relief to try to help businesses and other folks who are struggling, and employees and people who are struggling across this country. So in terms of the packages that we've seen so far, you know that we have seen Congress passed in the first bill that was passed provided emergency funding for the public health response. The second bill in mid-March provided some support for state unemployment insurance programs and really provided sick leave. There were some major loopholes in the sick leave, as we all know, that have yet to close, in the sense that those protections weren't there for employees who work for businesses under 500. And the third bill, passed on March 27th, provided over $2 trillion in coronavirus aid to individuals, businesses, healthcare providers, schools, state and local governments. And we know that, frankly, the rollout, just being real, of the PPP has been that's the Paycheck Protection Program, has been very challenging for a lot of businesses who have really struggled to get access to that relief. So I will talk in just a second about some of the ways in which the new bill is responding to that problem. So the CARES Act, which was the third package, provided $1,200 in cash assistance per adult, $500 per child. It extended for you business owners who have had to lay folks off and who are really worried about what are you going to do to make sure that employees are able to get benefits. It did extend unemployment insurance by 13 weeks and provided an additional $600 per week in benefits for 4 months. So that was trying to sort of push up to what would be equivalent to the full wage replacement for the average wage earner in the United States. That package provided a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions, but only for federally backed mortgages and housing receiving federal assistance. It also provided $150 billion for our healthcare system, $150 billion for state and local governments, which is not nearly enough, and we all know it, as well as money, a very small amount of money to help with assisting with elections, such as vote by mail, $400 million, not nearly enough. It provided $500 billion in industry aid, but that aid was not conditioned on layoff preventions and layoff prevention, which is such an important issue and something that all businesses, and particularly small businesses that we're hearing from, are trying to prevent having to lay off their staff. So finally, I want to get to the Paycheck Protection Program and come back to that. So the bill created a $350 billion Paycheck Protection Program to assist small businesses, and that was to assist small businesses with keeping employees on payroll. As we know, there were significant rollout challenges with the banks, and that program ran out of money in 2 weeks, even as many small businesses, and especially businesses in underserved areas, were unable to access it. So the size and shortcomings of the CARES Act underscore the magnitude of this crisis, and even though it was the largest stimulus bill in the United States history, it is actually quickly proving insufficient. And that's why yesterday, Congress passed an interim bill to provide additional support for small businesses, for healthcare providers, and testing. So let me talk about that. So the Trump administration initially requested $250 billion in additional funds for the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, with no additional funding for other programs. So at the insistence of Democrats in the House and Senate, the final bill includes $370 billion for small businesses, and ensures that a share of the loans will go to financial institutions in underserved communities, which is very important, and particularly for businesses that are owned by people of color. It also includes an additional $75 billion for healthcare providers and $25 billion for testing. And finally, it requires a national testing strategy from the Trump administration and better data on coronavirus infections and deaths, broken out, disaggregated for you data wonks, by race, sex, age, and geography, because as Congresswoman Barbara Lee noted yesterday on the House floor, the evidence has piled up that Black and brown people are bearing some of the worst burdens of COVID. So I want to say just one more moment on, since this is a particular area of interest for the folks on this call, on the Paycheck Protection Program. So we know that the CARES Act originally provided the $350 billion, allowing small businesses to apply for loans of up to $10 million through a bank. The way that that works is the federal government backs the loan and will convert it to a grant if the business maintains their workforce and maintains most worker pay. So that money is there for payroll support. That's what that's there for. The interim bill passed yesterday provides an additional $310 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program. $60 billion of that is directed to loans through small and mid-sized banks, credit unions, community development financial institutions, minority depository institutions, community development corporations, and microloan intermediaries. So the point of that $60 billion is to ensure that businesses in underserved communities, including minority-owned businesses, can access the program. So what we know from yesterday is that there are also additional funds directed toward economic injury disaster loans, which will be available through that program. Small businesses can apply for economic injury disaster loans of up to $10,000, and yesterday's bill provided an additional $10 billion for that program. So I imagine there might be people on this call who've experienced challenges with the PPP program. We've heard a lot about that. We've heard that banks, and there's plenty of data on this, that banks have tended to favor businesses with whom they've had existing substantial relationships. We know that most people who applied were not able to get the loans in the first round, and that led to the additional tranche of funding. We also know that restaurant and hotel chains applied for funds, and big companies like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and Shake Shack wound up making national news by getting these funds. And of course, we're also seeing the government calling for some of those funds to be returned. So it is important that this next tranche of funding for the PPP has come down, but our position is that, and Congresswoman Lee's position, is that Congress needs to do much more, and that we actually need a fourth package. And that's, I think, what we all need to be really calling for right now, is a fourth package, because good that Congress passed this interim relief yesterday, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And of course, we know that Congresswoman Pelosi, Leader Pelosi, has announced that she wants the House to put forward a bill to be considered. And members of Congress and the House of Representatives in particular have been working very hard to develop what should be in the fourth package. And the things that I've just talked about, in particular, layoff prevention and allowing employers to keep folks on payroll, is a huge emphasis of the fourth package. And so there's a push right now around something called a Paycheck Guarantee. A Paycheck Guarantee is a program like Denmark and Germany have, where the federal government could directly cover paychecks for workers whose employers are fully or partially shut down. I think this will be really, really important, an important addition if we can get this passed, because dollars to donuts, the PPP program, once the second tranche is through, there's going to be continued need. There's a call around an essential workers' bill of rights to make sure that our frontline workers have the protections they need and stay safe. A call for additional aid to state and local governments, including direct aid for cities like Alameda with less than 500,000 residents.
Yes.
And a federal...
I'll just chime in, Liz, that in the entire Bay Area, there are 2 cities that qualify with over 500,000, San Francisco and San Jose. The rest of the Bay Area is left out. Sorry, I'm impassioned about that.
It's unconscionable. So we have to continue the push for that as part of Package 4, because as we all know, our cities are providing these services that keep us all safe. And we can't, in a time of pandemic, in a time of crisis, when we need our city to work and provide those services more than ever, we can't leave them without the ability to do that. And then there's also a call for a federal moratorium on rental, on evictions of renters. So these are the kinds of solutions that we're seeing put on the table for Package 4. And I do want folks to know it is going to be really important that that folks continue to call for Package 4 to make sure that that happens. The Democrats in the House have made clear that that's where they're going. There's been less of a sense of urgency, I'll say, from the leadership in the Senate. And I think it's just going to take folks being very clear about the need to make this happen. So I want to stop there. I know I just talked at you for a while.
I am fascinated by that. I think I'm fast becoming a policy wonk, or maybe I was, but we're learning so much as we go. And thank you for that good information. Well, I don't know. It sounds like we got advice from the Senate leadership yesterday from Mitch McConnell saying that states should just file for bankruptcy. I mean, I guess that's a strategy, but nothing we're interested in California. But one of the things I was just looking through my notes that I was taking when our California, our the mayors in Congresswoman Lee's district were talking, and you know, the help for our local governments is so important because we are just shelling out money. I'm really proud of being a Bay Area mayor and our whole Bay Area in general because we're very progressive. We've already enacted eviction protections, not only for our residential tenants, but also for our commercial tenants, because if a business is shut down or operating at reduced capacity, their ability to pay their rent is greatly impacted. But we're also mindful of our small businesses. We want them to survive and be able to open again because they are just the heart and soul of our community. Come out sometime. I'll be happy to give you a tour. And so we're also looking to do grants and to do things like, well, for the properties that the city, where the city is the landlord because we own some property in town, to defer rent and to work out other arrangements because, as you said, everyone is hurting. So yes, cities need more help, and I'm glad there's more money for testing because one of the things our governor, Gavin Newsom, who's just been fabulous and proactive and really led the way for California early on. But he's looking to his public health officials and wants to see the test data and the number of hospitalizations and ICU admissions declining. But he also wants contact tracing. So when we get a more robust testing program, and it seems to be slowly inching up, there's all the contact tracing that's needed and isolation for those who test positive and support for those who are isolated and can't get out. But so the one question, and then I'm going to see what our listeners are asking. Liz, do you have any idea when this fourth package, another package would come to the Congress?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that folks in the House are working on putting that together right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see something as early as this coming week. When that gets voted on, I think is another question. One of the challenges we're facing right now, which you all might know about, is actually, the House flew in yesterday.
I know.
I understand Congresswoman Barbara Lee is on a flight, and I think
that's why she's not with us right now, folks. She's on a plane, and she talked about the challenge of flying. She said, I hope you don't have to go anyplace on a plane, but if you do, give yourself plenty of time. That even with airports not crowded, they're doing all the things we're doing, the social distancing, the masks, everything takes longer. So
we're still, one of the things that they did yesterday is they put a bipartisan committee together to try to crack this nut on remote voting, right? And that's actually something, this is one of those situations where the process and the substance are kind of coming together, because if we can't figure out how our Congress functions remotely, we're going to have a big problem. But right now they actually don't have a remote voting process. Yeah. So that makes, and what that, this is very procedural and I'm sorry, but what that ends up meaning is that a lot of these really big decisions get made without debate, decisions around billions of bucks. And we want our Congress to debate those things, but we don't want to put them in jeopardy. It kind of killed me yesterday to know about all these people flying in, from across the country and their staff.
Right.
It's just terrible. So, so I think something that folks can be thinking about amplifying and lifting up is the need for Congress to get this remote voting thing straightened out, so that as quickly as possible we can be working and they can be working on passing relief packages with the debate and the participation that marks our democracy.
All of the above. Well, before we run out of time, Sarah, do you have some questions for our guest or
yeah,
me?
I do. Well, so for Liz, somebody asked a question about 501c6 organizations and whether or not they could apply. And then they said, nope, they've checked the website and they're not eligible. But how could those organizations get some relief?
This is a good question. I'm trying to remember. It's 501c6 is that labor? I'm trying to remember what.
Yeah, I was just going through my mind. What's a 501c6?
Yeah, I'll have to remember. Yes, they're labor unions.
What are they, Liz?
Labor unions.
Labor unions. Okay.
Actually, I think it's a business association or a chamber of commerce.
Oh. This association. Okay. So this is a good question. Right now, there are certain groups that are exempt from the PPP program. And so that is a really difficult thing for groups that are, but one of the ways that relief can be gotten is through, and I think actually labor unions are also exempt from the program, which is why
I'm just looking online, and it is chambers of commerce. This might not be an all-exclusive list, but chambers of commerce, trade associations, real estate boards, professional associations, wait for it, pro football leagues, boards of trade, business leagues. It's not that I'm not a football fan, but please, people. Anyway, okay, so that one would have to be further delved into.
Labor unions are 501c5s, but they're also
okay.
So I think the thing that we there's a couple of different routes. One, if you are a part of an association, but you're actually employed by an employer, right, who can provide coverage for you, then hopefully you get covered, right? Then that's a way that the employees can get covered is through their employer. A second, and then the second route is UI, but it is true that there are certain groups that are, that will be left out of that, and that's something that, has been very difficult.
Thank you.
So Mayor, here's one, and maybe this is for both of you too. Could somebody address the city budget and the economy and the city revenue as it relates to the coronavirus?
It's getting slammed. I'm in my office at City Hall, and just a little earlier I was meeting with our city manager, Eric Levitt, and he has been working with our finance department. They have an outside consultant who, even before this, was looking at the city's budget. The good news is our city budget was in pretty good shape, and we had a reserve. The city council mandates, Sarah, I always get a little blurry on the percentage, but the percentage of our reserve is 25% of our general fund balance. And so we're dipping into that. We've started dipping into that. We might need to again. We made a decision, the council met this past week, and we made a decision to just modify a policy that we had put in place in 2017, that whenever we had unanticipated revenues, we made sure that general fund balance and reserve were where they were supposed to be. And then we took 50% of what was left over from that unanticipated revenue and paid down some of our pension, our CalPERS obligations beyond just our monthly required payments. And then we put aside some of that surplus also into a lockbox for the rainy day when we might have trouble paying our retirement pension costs. Well, so our fiscal year ends at the end of June for this year, and we hadn't made that payment yet, but that money that we'd allotted for this year was $7.1 million. So the council, at the suggestion of the city manager, said this fiscal year, we're not going to put that into the lockbox or pay down advance payments to CalPERS. We're going to use that to help with what we're trying to do for our businesses, for our renters, and just for the extra expenses the city is incurring. Now, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, does have a reimbursement program, which is after the fact, but it's not 100%, 100 cents on the dollar. So we'll certainly be applying for that. But what the city manager said to me when we met is that they'll be bringing some budget modifications to us. I don't know, this next one, maybe the second meeting in May, to look at doing, some cuts, some maybe delaying some projects, because we need to keep the ship afloat. But I can tell you that we have a really smart, savvy, but incredibly calm city manager who's been through some tough financial times in other cities before he came to us. And he's been thinking about this for weeks and strategizing. And the city council also asked our finance department to start giving us regular updates every council meeting, at least once a month, because this situation is so rapidly changing.
And I'll just add,
Yeah,
one of
Liz.
the things that Congresswoman Barbara Lee is trying to do to help out with that situation, which she may have mentioned, is a bill that she is sponsoring called the Coronavirus Community Relief Act, and that would hopefully be a part of this fourth package, which would allow cities with populations under 500,000 to get access to an additional $250 billion in relief. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is also introducing, who you may know, she's the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, is also introducing this Paycheck Guarantee Act program that would allow state and local employers to participate and be included within the definition of employer to seek funds when you're having trouble keeping folks on payroll.
Thank you for that. What else have you got for us, Sarah?
Well, I think we're running out of time, but I'll do one more. Here's one more last question, and it's about testing. So both in terms of how will that funding for Liz be allocated to testing, and then for the city of Alameda, how can Alameda start doing testing here locally?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how will the testing money be allocated was the first one?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that, Liz?
Well, I can tell you that the Families First Coronavirus Response Act required testing at no out-of-pocket cost for patients, whether you have private or government-sponsored health coverage. So that is now in effect. Yesterday's bill requires the implementation of a national testing strategy from the Trump administration, because as we know, we have yet to see that. And the point of that was to address—
I thought you were going to talk about drinking bleach, but no, sorry.
Okay, just for a moment of levity, if you don't mind. So
Not at all.
This morning, I wake up and my sister-in-law has texted me a picture of her kale and yogurt. You'll appreciate this in California. Her kale and yogurt, even she's from the Midwest, but even in the Midwest, we drink, sometimes folks drinking kale and yogurt smoothies. And then she had a bottle of Clorox, which she did not pour in, and no one should. So anyway, so it was the funniest thing I saw all day. But back to more serious matters. House Democrats, yes?
Yeah, go ahead. No, and then I'll talk about the local angle.
Okay.
On testing, not bleach, sorry.
Yeah, no, there is no angle on bleach that we should really be talking about. House Democrats have introduced the Reopen America Act, which sets scientifically based criteria for what testing needs to be in place and what thresholds should be met before communities lift stay-at-home restrictions. So, the fact is that we know that this will be very important for state and local governments to put measures in place, but we also really need guidelines from the federal government around reopening. And Mayor, it was just very heartening to hear, the good sense that you're bringing to this very, very difficult situation. And how
thank you, Liz. Well, I say so often that we are so fortunate to live in California, where we have a proactive, not a reactive governor who's been on top of this from the beginning. And he's a former mayor of San Francisco, a little bit young to have governed during the HIV/AIDS crisis, but he was certainly familiar with the legacy of that public health crisis in his city. And then we have harmony among our congressional representatives, our Senate. I mean, we're just blessed in California. And so I'm also on a weekly briefing call from the White House every week. And I kind of listen with gritted teeth sometimes, but but the medical people are great. It's just that when they're giving advice and talking about what it will take to reopen the country, it's nothing that our governor and our public health officers haven't talked about for weeks now. But on the testing locally, and that's a good question. I was just thinking about that this morning. Our next door neighbor city, the city of Oakland, and their fabulous mayor, Libby Schaaf, have made available 2 testing sites in downtown Oakland for free testing for any medical workers, first responders, any essential workers in public facing capacities, like your grocery store workers, like folks who work at the post office, and that's no matter where you live. So Alamedans can go there. They follow the CDC guidelines, so you have to be either showing symptoms or have been exposed to someone who tested positive, but you don't need a doctor's referral. You go online, and I know we've published the email address before. There's an email to register and also to ask questions, and then you get a scheduled appointment to come in for free testing, which is great. But I was just thinking about that this morning. This is what it's going to take to get us open again for business. We need to be able to do more testing, even beyond those people who definitely should have priority. But I would like it if folks who live and work in Alameda didn't have to. We're telling you to shelter in place. I'd like it if you didn't have to leave town. So I am going to, the city manager and I just ran out of time when we met earlier, but Monday I'm going to talk to him about, and we've already reached out to the county and said, Alameda is ready, willing, and able. We can find a testing site if you want to set one up here. But I think it's time, the county is doing a masterful job. Alameda County is our county, but I think it may be time to double back with them and say, we would really like one here in the city, which would work well with the increase. I think we're seeing increases in test kits. But Sarah, I think we've come to the end of our hour and then some, haven't we?
We have.
Liz, we thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I feel that if we can all meet remotely like this, I mean, why shouldn't Congress be able to do the same thing?
Wonderful to be on with all of you. It was an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for your leadership, Mayor.
Oh, thank you. I have a wonderful city and wonderful constituents. They're a pretty progressive crowd too, and they're smart and they're well informed, but there's so much information. I just want to keep you as up to date as I can about all these new developments. So thank you for helping me inform my constituents. And with that, I thank everyone for joining us. Don't forget, even in this lovely spring weather, you're going to physically distance from others when you're outside. You're going to wear your mask at all times when you're out from your house. Stay safe, take care, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye, everyone.
Good to
Thank
see
you,
you
Mayor.
all.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I miss everyone.